Thank you, Garrett. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. I think as we can all agree, school libraries spark imagination and foster a lifelong love of learning within our children. When kids go to school and visit their school library, we want to know that they're finding age-appropriate materials on the shelves. Yet, unfortunately, through investigations conducted by my office, we have found books in K-12 schools that show extremely age-inappropriate content. I'm here today to discuss an important initiative that Alberta's government is undertaking to ensure that materials in our school libraries, particularly those with graphic sexual content, are developmentally appropriate. And I want to be clear right from the onset, this is not a question of banning specific books or specific titles, but rather establishing clear policies and guidelines for all school divisions to follow. Alberta does not have a single province-wide standard to guide school boards in selecting school library materials that contain graphic sexual content. So as a result, different boards have taken different approaches to choosing these kinds of materials for their school libraries. In some instances, sexually explicit material has made their way onto school library shelves, raising significant concerns for parents. These materials contain nudity and graphic explicit depictions of sexual acts and images, including oral sex. For example, in one graphic novel found in K-9 schools in Calgary and Edmonton, the book contains significant mature content, including graphic depictions of sexual activity and graphic depictions of sexual nudity. In another example found in our schools, again found in K-9 schools and high schools in Edmonton, another title contains mature content such as sexual nudity and sexual activities. In another graphic novel found with students in K-9 range in Edmonton and Calgary, the book contains mature content such as child molestation, sexual activity, and nudity, in addition to other mature content such as alcohol use, drug use, profanity, and other derogatory terms. Another example, again found within elementary, junior high, and high schools in Calgary and Edmonton, contains graphic depictions of sexual activity and nudity, in addition to other mature content, including depictions of self-harm, violence, profanity, and other derogatory terms. I would show these images to all of you here and to the media, but they are too graphic for a live stream media event. These examples, while graphic, illustrate the kind of content that raises concerns amongst parents. Today I'm announcing that Alberta's government will begin work to develop new standards to guide school boards in selecting and managing materials with sexual content in their school library collections, and we're looking for input from Albertans. I want to tell you a little bit more about how we're approaching these new requirements. Having a consistent set of standards across the province will give parents reassurance that when it comes to materials in school libraries, their children are seeing books and other material that is appropriate for their age. We want to ensure transparency for parents so that they know what is available in their school library, and to have a process for complaints and concerns about book materials and other library materials. Some initial polling we have explored confirms that parents and the public support this general direction. In May, a survey found that 51% of respondents believe that materials containing explicit sexual depictions or descriptions of sexual acts should not be permitted in any library accessible to children. However, 94% of respondents said that these materials should not be available in elementary schools, and 85% of parents said it is important that parents have a say in what materials are present in their school library. By establishing clear, consistent standards, we hope to provide stronger guidance for our school boards and address concerns effectively. We value and recognize the expertise of librarians, administrators, and other school staff. By developing new standards, we will support their important work with consistent guidance to base their decision on selecting and managing school library materials. But first, we are asking Albertans to provide their input by completing a short survey. We will use that feedback to develop province-wide standards that would apply to public, separate, francophone, charter, and independent schools. In addition, we will be engaging with school board trustees and other administrators to gain their insight and feedback as to how book selection can be more appropriately be managed. The standards would not affect materials in public libraries in the province, including 55 municipal public libraries located inside schools. My department will work with school boards to ensure successful implementation by the start of the next school year. The survey will be on alberta.ca, and I do again warn everyone that takes a survey that images of the books contained within the survey may be off-putting to some viewers. These new standards are a necessary step to ensure transparency and appropriateness of resources in our school libraries. By addressing the concerns of parents, providing clear guidelines, and involving the community in the decision-making process, we can create a more transparent and supportive environment for our students. We're committed to working closely with our education partners to ensure these standards are implemented effectively and that all students feel supported in their learning environments. So in closing, I encourage anyone with concerns to provide their valuable input via the survey. The survey, again, is on alberta.ca and will be available until June 6th. I am confident that together we can make a positive impact on the educational experience of our students in an age-appropriate way. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, folks, so remember, one question, one follow-up. Only ministers at the podium, so clearly it'll be for minister. Please state your name and your outlet. And there's the media mic just over there, if you could please use that. And we'll go to the first reporter at the mic. Go ahead.
Hi, Colleen Underwood, CBC Calgary. First question, just what actually has been done with the books that you raised or parents raised concerns with? Have those been removed from schools? Have any as of yet been removed?
The provincial government does not have the authority to remove individual books, nor am I suggesting that we have that authority here today. We have raised those concerns with the individual school boards that we have seen some of these books. And so I would have to defer you to them with respect to additional action that they may have taken.
And you mentioned some of the other, we're the only, or we don't have a province-wide policy. Do you know of any other place that does that would you'd compare to?
Yeah, I'm not familiar offhand with any other province that has province-wide standards. Of course, each province has different approaches in managing their education system generally. We do, as I mentioned, have voluntary guidelines, and so that has created a variance of policies and approaches. So we just want to put some more provincial-wide guardrails in place to make it more consistent.
Next reporter at the mic, please and thank you.
Carolina Vendano, the Epoch Times. Minister, you have provided some examples of the books that you say are age-inappropriate. I'm wondering if there was a particular incident that prompted these measures. For example, if a parent found these books or children came home talking about it, what prompted these right now? Yeah, exactly. In fact, a group of parents approached me and provided me with excerpts from many of these books and other material. Initially, to be very honest, I was very skeptical. I thought that this was maybe examples from other jurisdictions or other countries. They showed me information, though, that suggested that it was indeed available at a variety of different schools. And what really got me concerned is when they indicated that they had information that demonstrated this was available in elementary schools. So that's why we took a closer look over the next couple of months to see if this was indeed the case
and validated and verified the information, which we've confirmed is indeed the case. So that was the particular incident that kind of raised this to our attention.
Thank you, Minister. My follow-up is, what recourse will parents or schools have if they disagree with a decision to either remove or keep a book in the library?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we want to explore as part of the engagement that we are launching here today. There are mechanisms already in place for parents to be able to challenge the content of any particular book that may exist in a school library. But I think there's a little bit more work that we need to do in that regard. So I hope that we can get a more robust answer from parents and from school trustees and administrators as we conduct this engagement over the next few months.
Next reporter at the mic, please.
Heather Urix, West Global National. I can anticipate there'll be concerns from LGBT advocates that this could result in less access to pro-LGBT or gender diverse materials. Your response to that?
I don't think it should. I don't think that there's any reason why these standards should limit content related to any subject or any topic. The standards that we're looking at will relate specifically to books that contain graphic sexual images or graphic depictions. That's what our concern is. So this is not related to any kind of particular subject area. If there was a book on astrophysics that had graphic sexual content, I would have the exact same concerns.
And do you know what kind of repercussions there might be for schools that don't want to abide by these new standards in protest, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I would hope that all school boards would follow the procedures and guidelines that the province sets in place. Again, we'll be chatting with them to see that if there are some serious areas where they can't follow the guidelines, but I don't think it should be a big problem to follow guidelines that broadly say you can't have graphic sexual images in elementary schools or in junior high schools, or I don't think that should be a big problem.
All right, thank you.
And last reporter at the mic before we go to lines.
Caden Brayshaw, Livewire Calgary. You mentioned wanting books to be age appropriate, but you listed a lot of different grades where these books have been available. How do you define for a certain book what age is appropriate for the students to be reading?
Yeah, this is an important question that we're going to need to address, and it's part of the reason why I want to conduct a little bit more engagement with parents to get their perspective, because I think it's ultimately their final decision as to what kinds of material their children should be exposed to. And as we mentioned, in some of the preliminary research and survey work that we've done, I think it was well over 90% said that books containing graphic sexual images should not be available anywhere in an elementary school environment. So we want to dig a little bit deeper and hopefully through that research help to define where those lines should be.
Yeah. My follow-up is, in a world where most of these kids have access to the internet, where this sexual content is readily available, most kids don't read as many physical books anymore, how will changing the content on these books make that big of an impact?
Yeah, well, it will make an impact. You know, we recently put in new standards regarding the use of personal mobile devices in schools, and similarly, within that policy announcement also provided that students would not be able to access certain sites, including social media sites, while at school. So those restrictions and those kind of parameters are already in place. And so the same should occur in our school libraries. What students do in their private time or at home is obviously none of our consideration. But as it relates to material that is available in a public school library, then or in any school library for that matter, then it's something I think that warrants our attention.
Thanks, Minister.
You're welcome.
All right, last reporter at the mic, and then we'll go to the lines.
Hi, my name is Orzuma Compaore with Radio Canada. So, Minister, how do you intend to draw the line between what's inappropriate, artistic, or with educative material?
Sure. Again, I think we have to talk a little bit more with parents to get their understanding of where that line is. I'm a parent myself, and I don't believe that books containing graphic depictions of oral sex are appropriate in an elementary school environment. And some of the authors, in fact, of some of these particular titles that we've identified have even suggested themselves that these are not appropriate for children. So we're happy to follow the advice and guidance of the individual authors and the general direction of parents.
Good. Follow-up question. So you're putting together a team that's going to, be able to reflect on all that. Who is going to be part of the team?
Yeah, so we've already started conversations, in fact, with school board trustees and superintendents and administrators. Of course, the school board trustees and the administrators are the ones who set the policies, procedures, and practices of a school division. So we'll be chatting primarily with them. And of course, other staff, librarians would be important partners for us to have conversations, school librarians, I should say, as it relates to this issue, and parents. So these will be the three primary categories of individuals that we'll be discussing with.
All right, operator, please put through our first caller.
Don Braid with Calgary Herald.
Minister, you sure woke me up on a Monday morning, I'll tell you that. I just wonder how your people dealt with this. They had a report from parents, and you checked into that. Did you actually send officials into the schools to see this material for themselves?
We did, in a couple of instances, look to go into particular schools where the books had been identified to see if they were indeed on the shelf, and so that was confirmed and validated. Further, many of our school divisions have publicly accessible digital catalogs of all of the books that they have available in their school libraries, and whether they're on the shelf and or checked out. So we were also able to look through that information with some of these titles to explore if they were indeed in a school's collection.
Follow-up,
This is a follow-up. It's pretty, some of this stuff is pretty stunning, for sure. And my question is, how does it get there? There are companies in Alberta, I believe there are 3 companies in Alberta, that actually sell these books, graphic novels, and it's kind of an industry because schools aren't, a lot of people in schools are older and they're not used to graphic novels, and they need some advice on how to handle them and the content, and they get that from some of these reputable companies and buy according to what the companies provide. So my question is, how do things like this, which certainly have got to be outliers, these books you pointed out, how do they get in?
I think that's a very important question, and one of the main questions that I want some answers to as well. I want to get a little bit of a better understanding of how this occurred in the first place and how these books ended up on school shelves. And I don't want to point fingers. I don't want to cast aspersions or blame anyone. There's clearly something with respect to process and procedure that is faltered here. And I intend to investigate that in a little bit more detail, get a better understanding from our school board trustees and administrators directly, and work to address it. That's our goal, so that these types of books do not end up in the hands of a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old.
Operator, next phoner, please.
Sean Amato with City News.
Hi, Minister. I just want to get an understanding of what your objection to the word ban is. I guess I take your point that you're not going after specific titles, but the point of changing this process or these rules is to get rid of these books that you've deemed inappropriate. So it is, in effect, a de facto ban, is it not?
No, I would completely disagree. A book ban is a selection of specific titles, and through some government instrument order directing that those specific titles not be available in schools. That's not what we're doing here today. What we're doing is engaging with our school trustees, administrators, and parents to understand what should the guardrails be of provincial-wide policies. Again, schools already have policies in place, so to your logic, we might already be able to say that school boards themselves are banning books because they have policies in place regarding the selection of materials. So they already have policies in place. There are no provincial-wide standards, and that's what we intend to do, is to have some clear standards, something as simple as to say that you can't have graphic depictions of oral sex in elementary schools, and books of that topic are not permitted in elementary schools. So that's what we aim to do with our policy revision.
Follow-up, Sean?
What if somebody complains about the Bible because there are, not graphic depictions, I don't believe, but there are written accounts of things like rape and murder and some things that probably are not topics that are not necessarily appropriate for elementary schools, to your point. So what would happen if somebody raises objections to some of the explicit content that we see in all kinds of books, including the Bible.
An individual has the opportunity to raise any objection that they have with any book found in a school library. They can do that currently. As we go through the next couple of months in engaging on the development of these policies, our intent is to ensure that extreme offenders such as these ones that have been identified do not make their way into a school library. Of course, there are lots of examples of in a variety of different novels and other important works that maybe contain references to violence and other pieces. So that's where I think we need to work on helping to develop the standards. You know, is it a challenge to have a book that has commentary about violence? Probably not. Is it a problem to have a graphic novel that has graphic depictions of oral sex? Probably. So that's where I think we need to work to draw some of those lines.
Operator, next caller, please.
Sheila Gunreed with Rebel News.
Sheila Gunreed with Rebel News. Minister, these materials aren't appropriate for TV or a live stream, but will a published list of these books be made available so that people can see for themselves what is now being eliminated from school libraries?
In the public survey that we will be providing to Albertans, we will have a link into that survey for individuals to see some of the suggestible content that we're referring to. Because, of course, it's so hard to put all of this into context without providing some examples of what we're actually referring to. So there will be some links available through the survey where an individual, if they so desire, can have a look at the material that is causing concern.
Follow up, Sheila?
Yes. Is the Alberta government prepared to go to court to defend this policy if activists or civil liberties groups try to sue?
Well, I wouldn't want to jump too far ahead of myself. I would have to explore if something like that happens, what the merits of that are, and determine next steps from there. So I couldn't give you a detailed answer, unfortunately, at this point in something that may occur. But we do firmly believe that children in our schools should not have access to books that contain graphic depictions of sexual acts.
Operator, next caller.
Tamir Durrani with Globe and Mail.
Hello, Minister. Thank you so much for taking our questions today. I want to sort of get a real understanding here of what exactly it is you're doing with specific books here, because from the examples that we've been provided ahead of this announcement, and right now that you're talking about, some of which you're saying are inappropriate for this, the four of them are all graphic novels, right? You've said there's multiple books that you've investigated and found, but you've listed only four that are graphic novels each, and a majority of which deal with LGBTQ subjects. So I guess I'm trying to understand, is it only graphic novels, or are you also talking about written novels? And are they only LGBTQ subjects, or are there other subjects that might be more graphic? Could you give us an understanding of what it is exactly, which novels that the province is going to help people out with in the standards that the boards need to be setting here?
Sure. We don't have a definitive answer, and we haven't made a final decision on those questions. What I'm announcing today is that we're going to spend the next couple of months getting more information from parents, getting more information from trustees, administrators, and others about where these lines should be and how we should craft the policy. So that's what we're going to spend the next couple of months doing, is getting more perspective. And then in a future point, we will be releasing the policies that we develop. So I think a lot of your questions will be answered in the coming months when we actually firmly develop these policies and make them publicly available. Our big concern, though, is around the graphic depiction of molestation, sexual acts, and self-harm. That is my biggest concern, is around the graphic depiction of some of these acts. So we still have to work on developing these policies and exactly where the lines will be drawn, and I'll be very happy to provide you with those details when the policies are ready.
Follow up.
Yeah, I get a limited number of questions here in the way that we're asking you today, but I do want to say, Minister, to your question, at this point, the reality is, these things do happen in the real world, and kids do see these things online in many different ways. In a book form, it's a very different thing. So I understand where you're coming from with this, but these are graphic novels that are written in a graphic novel sort of way. This is not usually in the way that you're depicting pornography per se. I take that point, and I hope you could address that as well. But my real question here, because I get a limited set of questions, I do want to ask you about, you mentioned earlier that the province does not have any authority per se to be able to book ban, and that's why you don't, have you don't want to call it a ban, that what you're doing here is that. So we won't use that word. We can use prohibiting, I imagine, or some other word that you would prefer. But I want to sort of understand here, are you going to create any legislation to get that authority then? How are you going to do this? I mean, because what we've been told is that the 2025 to 2026 year is when this will get applied. That only leaves a few months this summer. Will you be able to come up with these policies for the school board to concretely develop and follow by the fall? Could you give us an insight into that? Is there legislative action happening?
No, we don't anticipate any legislative action. I do anticipate we will be in a position to have the new policies and standards in place in advance of the upcoming school year. The current legislative authority in the Education Act does provide the Minister of Education with authority to set policies and standards related to the provision of education. So there is already broadly that authority for the Minister to set standards and policies with aspects that deal with education. So, but that's the difference here, right? I don't have any kind of authority to go and pick a particular book off the shelf and say we're not allowing this book in our schools. We can't ban books. The minister doesn't have that authority. There's no legislative authority to do that. The minister, though, does have the authority to develop policies, and so we will be developing a new policy again, as I mentioned, that will simply say something to the effect that books containing graphic depictions of sexual acts, molestation, or self-harm cannot be permitted in elementary schools or in junior high schools. That'll be at a very high level some of the guardrails that we're looking to establish. We don't intend or desire to reduce content on any particular subject, but again, we just want to make sure that that subject is communicated in an age-appropriate way. And I should reference again, some of these authors of some of these specific graphic novels have even said themselves they do not recommend these books for children.
All right, we have time for one more question. Operator, please put through the caller.
Jack Farrell with the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. I'm a little bit confused. You go back and forth between saying that you don't think these four graphic novels you brought up here are appropriate for junior high school kids and elementary school kids, and then sometimes you just say elementary school kids. So I guess my question is that, are these four books fine in high schools but not in junior and elementary schools? Are they fine in junior high schools and high schools but not elementary? Like, what's your clear position there?
Yeah, my clear position is that these specific examples are not appropriate for kids, full stop. I wanted, though, talk with parents and get a better understanding to see what their collective view is. We did that with the implementation of the cell phone policy as well. We talked with parents to get their perspective about what extent of cell phone use they thought is appropriate during breaks, not during breaks, only during learning time. So that's my personal position, but that will not inform the final development of the policy. I'm going to sit down and get some more perspective from parents, understand more from administrators and school board trustees, and then we'll take an insightful approach into developing the final policies.
Follow up?
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious how this plays into, sexual education in schools. Obviously, like school library materials and classroom materials are different, but if your concern is sexual material available to kids through books, it applies to me that, that would be the same for sex ed in schools. And my real question for you, though, is why is topics of sexual nature, and in this sense, like as we see in these graphic novels, why is that wrong for high school kids that in some cases can vote, can drink, can drive, and why is it necessary to protect them from, sexual education?
This is not about protecting them from sexual education. Students in high school, for the most part, are minors. For the most part, cannot drink alcohol, cannot vote. You have to be, of course, 18. There are cases where you have 18-year-olds in grade 12, but for the most part, they are not. And so this isn't about protecting them from sex education. We do have a robust sex education curriculum that we work towards delivering. But this is part of the reason why we aren't able to show some of these images. There's a potential that there could be some issues with displaying pornographic images to minors, which is a criminal offense. So this again, I just want to be very clear that we're talking about very extremely graphic depictions of acts. We're not talking of books that say that another individual likes another person or something of that nature. But these are, I'm sure as you've probably seen from the pre-release, these are extremely graphic depictions of molestation, of self-harm, of suicide, and of oral sex and other kinds of graphic depictions. So I don't think a minor should be viewing this type of material.
All right, folks, thank you very much for your time today. If we didn't get you around to, please give me an email. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.